Thanks, Bongani. Now, tonight, the South African Institute of Chartered Accountants, called SAICA, is holding its third, what's called Courageous Conversations. Now, this is a series in which the industry is basically discussing recent corporate scandals that have plagued the sector. Of course, it all began with KPMG and chartered accountants, auditors, doing a lot of introspection. What does it mean going forward, looking into ways to gain back credibility in both professions? Today, the accounting body brings together, now listen to this high-level panel, the Deputy Auditor General, Tsakane Ratsela, the IDC, the Industrial Development Corporation CEO, Jeffrey Ena, the Old Mutual Chair, Trevor Manuel, all in an effort to find steps to collectively correct. That's a panel discussion underway. Let's listen in for a while.
And can I add to diversity age? Because the majority of these memberships are not our age, they're 35 and younger. And get some of those younger people involved to understand and get the right views around the table. So it's very important, in my view, to fix.
The ANC calls it generational mix. I mean, one of the things you're getting to there is, and I think the recent history of South Africa tells us what happens when the wrong things happen at the board level. I mean, recent history of parastatals would tell us all about that. The question is, why hasn't it happened already? And is there pushback from SAICA? I realize you're speaking in their headquarters right now. Is it that? Is it because they're established people with power who don't want to give it up? Is it because the crisis just isn't that great a crisis?
I think hopefully everybody realizes that this is really serious stuff. You know, this crisis is make or break, I think, for the profession more broadly. But yes, there must always be, and there are always, and I see it with the work that I do on the research work on governance behavior. There are things like being in a powerful position and we don't want to give it up. Being comfortable with the way in which things are, not really seeing the need for change. I would like to believe that there's now a whole new page, that leaf that we've turned, and there's a realization that these things have to change and will have to change soon. That the luxury of time is not there.
Thanks, Stephen. I want to make 2 points. Jeff Bernard over here is the CEO of a large corporation, the Industrial Development Corporation. If you go to their integrated report, we'll all know, he's a CA, but we'll know what he earns. There are managing partners of audit firms here. We're not allowed to know what they earn. There's no transparency in the profession itself. So people get away with what they can. And I think it's bred the wrong culture. And unless you have symmetrical transparency across everybody, you're not going to deal with it. So that's one point. The other point I want to raise is, what do you do in a crisis? Now, in the wake of Enron, we looked at the audit profession in South Africa. And in spite of a lot of resistance, because the PAB, the Public Accountants and Auditors Board, was self-regulatory. And we had to change the legislation and put in place IRBA as a regulatory body. But I think IRBA has also slipped into the comfort zone. And like SAICA, IRBA has disciplinary issues that are like 7 years old, that they are incapable of concluding. And if justice is denied, then it's denied. Justice is delayed, it's denied, and that's part of the problem we're dealing with. There's no urgency about the problems, because in this little guild, it's not a club, it's a guild, where people join for life. They get away with what they can because there's no public scrutiny. I want a conversation about these issues. I'm being my provocative self.
I can see that. I mean, why is that still happening? I mean, some of the things, you know, I mean, it's just obvious that we should know how much these people are earning and where the money is actually coming from.
I suppose it's something we've not demanded enough of. I think if we, as the public, start to raise the alarm and remind auditors and accountants that actually you, by taking on the role of accountant, have acknowledged your responsibilities to the public, to act in the public interest. Therefore, this lack of transparency, this strange governance set of arrangements that you've got is inconsistent with your being in this world today where you're here to serve us as a public. So I think we just haven't demanded it.
Helen, it's a no-brainer, right?
Well, it depends on what your brain is. I'd say that as a regulator, I knew a whole lot more about how partners got paid than I ever knew as a partner, right? So I don't think that transparency in all firms, and maybe things have changed, maybe things are dramatically different here, doesn't necessarily exist within the partnership. On an international scale, the monitoring group has a call out and a suggestion for firms to provide audited financial statements. And I think full audited financial statements from firms would be a huge step forward. Whether you're focused on what an individual partner makes or doesn't make, to understand the financial position of an audit firm, I think would contribute to the public interest.
Jeffrey, you're a big consumer of their product. Would you agree with that?
Well, it should be a good start for us to know. But I suppose it comes back to the point, if they think that the public interest is not key, then it shouldn't be an issue. But I think it's a good start. It shouldn't be, I mean, as Takane said, maybe we just didn't ask. And we should ask now that we find ourselves here, and I think we should. And let's see who's going to say no and why.
I have asked, my day job is mostly as the chairman of a couple of listed company audit committees, and I've asked that question. I have asked to see, I would like, especially with the tendering process, we would like to understand how important is this audit fee in relation to that partner. If we're going to make up 50-80% of what you earn as a partner, you're not necessarily going to blow the whistle and want to lose our audit. It's not easy. It's actually impossible. You don't get that information out of the firms. Firms are starting in Europe. There's a lot of pressure on transparency reports, and for firms to start being much more transparent about what's the split between your audit revenue and your advisory revenue, because that is very interesting and useful information. How much advisory services are you going to try to squeeze out of us? Why don't you also have your own results audited? At the moment, a lot of those so-called transparency reports in South Africa, because you do see them, is a marketing tool, and it talks about who your clients are and all the logos and so on. I think it's crucial information. You can't be professing to be a specialist in reporting, in audit, in governance, but your own organization doesn't buy into that. And I think audit firms should be doing that, and I think SAICA should be doing that and playing by the rules that we use as basis to make money. We should be applying those rules to ourselves as well.
Trevor, there's bound to be the CEO of at least one of the big four companies here.
Well, a couple of them are here. Yeah. Do you want me to call them out so they can get up and speak?
We've got a hand. We've got a hand, sir.
I'm the CEO of Deloitte. I've said to Trevor before, he's disappointed.
I'm sorry, Lwazi, can we just ask for a microphone? I think one is coming. Lwazi Bum is the person that you're hearing from the audience. He's the CEO of Deloitte, but also a board member of SAICA, chairman of SAICA. I apologize. I apologize.
While we're waiting for a mic, can I just say...
There we go. Here's the microphone.
You can't say
So I've said to Trevor before that you'll be disappointed when he actually finds out how much we earn.
The microphone.
Okay. So the issue around transparency, I think that it is key. It is something that we as a profession should move to. And a number of organizations, as Linda was saying, have started disclosing transparency reports. But what is lacking is a structure of what you disclose. And Trevor is right in that compared to, for instance, the UK, Japan, Netherlands, there's a lot more disclosure, and I think we're getting there. But the question that I wanted to perhaps pose to Helen is, what do you believe was the impact of introducing Sarbanes-Oxley in the US? Because when we talk about the importance of improving what auditors do, but we've also been talking about how do we improve the whole ecosystem, the audit committees, the boards, the financial reporting people. So what do you think Sarbanes-Oxley did for the US?
I think Sarbanes-Oxley truly changed the profession, changed the audit profession in the U.S. We went from a self-regulated profession to a profession regulated by an independent entity with funding coming from auditors to a small extent, but mostly from public companies. We introduced a system of inspections, a system of standard setting that is free from interference or influence from the profession. It's certainly open through outreach to seek that feedback, but the standards themselves, the setting of those, is part of the responsibility of the PCAOB. Sarbanes-Oxley required that the relationship of the auditor and their client fundamentally change. It went from a relationship where the client was the CFO to the client is the audit committee. And fees are negotiated with the audit committee, and the audit committee can hire and fire the auditor, with a similar responsibility for the audit committee to stand up for the auditor and make sure that the auditor could properly engage with management. One of the other very important outcomes of Sarbanes-Oxley that I didn't really talk about much before was the management taking responsibility not only for the accounts but for the system of internal controls that allow for the presentation and the development of those accounts. And an appropriate job by management enables the auditor to do their job and to do their job well. It's much easier to do a high-quality compliant audit if a client has an appropriate system of internal control, well documented. Where that doesn't exist, the auditor's job can be near impossible. And where that doesn't exist, auditors really need to be able to have some structure, right, in order to deal with those clients in an appropriate way. And that appropriate way is to require them to take full responsibility for their accounts.
Yeah, I won't call out the other heads of audit practices.
I had more questions for him, by the way.
But I just wanted to follow up on the point just made. I mean, I chair a company, and I'm very happy that we have the chair of an audit committee who is as tough as he is, and of course he's right here in the House. And alongside him, the head of internal audit is a bulldog who's not liked by management, and that's good for us as well. Because if those systems work, and the head of internal audit has a short line to the chair of the audit committee, I think that all of us in the company can sleep more comfortably, Chair. And then, of course, the senior audit partner of our auditors, KPMG, the senior audit partner is also in the House. I think it's a discussion we must have. I think that we've tarred everybody with the same brush, but there are layers of complexity that we need to try and understand about how we go through. Because, you know, every day you open the newspaper. So you opened the FT today, Quindal, and people say, oh, KPMG. But this afternoon there was a barrage from Dubai that has filed for bankruptcy, and the first question you ask is, who are the auditors? Satyam in India, who are the auditors? What's happened in Brazil, who are the auditors? And you can run through the list, and none of the big four have been spared. But if we want to deal with issues at that high level, I think we're going to repeat a mantra that actually doesn't find resonance. As we sit right now, we all need good quality audits, and how do we get there? is the question, and I think it's that we must discuss to ensure that the pride that people speak of in the badge of being a chartered accountant is something that will find resonance, whether you are inside the company or inside the firm. It's being able to deal with issues like that, and hopefully that's the conversation that we can take out from this evening.
I mean, we've spoken about some of the institutional fixes, the structural fixes, but in a way, Trevor, I think you're talking about a culture as well, of robustness, of honesty, of doing the right thing. Deputy Auditor General, I mean, you want to, in a strange way, it is also a unique moment to change a culture, because people are probably going to be displaced before all of this is gone, and that makes, before all of this is done, that makes it a bit easier sometimes.
Well, it depends on whom you're displacing. The tragedy is that too often the people that the profession will lose are those we actually shouldn't lose first, right? And we're left with those we should have lost. So it'll take a long time, I think, if we are not swift about taking the relevant action. It'll take a long time to rebuild capacity and capability that we lose because we take too long to take the action. So what I'm saying is it is urgent that we act, because if we don't, we will lose people, talent, out of the profession. And also, if we start to lose the interest of new entrants into the profession, it's going to take a long time to rebuild. If we tarnish that pipeline, if that pipeline gets compromised, it's going to take a long time, because it would mean for 2-3 years you don't have enough people entering the profession, and 7 years later you're surprised, where are the recruits? And we would have forgotten, some of us might have moved on even, we would have forgotten that it is because we were not swift enough in taking the necessary action today.
Jeffrey, you've got your hand up.
Yes. Just on that point in what Trevor said, it's how we respond to this. It's very important because, as Sakane says, those aspiring CAs will not have a home. So I would say, for me, the challenge is to the senior management of these auditing firms to say, what example are we setting? Because those people go in there for training. I was once an article clerk when I used not to be called a trainee. I was an article clerk. And I used to learn on the job. Now, if those people who are teaching you, or at least were supposed to be guiding, actually misleading you should take responsibility. Let those that are learning not be able to suffer. Now, somebody said, some people are like clouds. When they leave, it's a good day. So let those be the ones. But the ones that are really wanting to come in, let them be given up. So now if we punish everybody and we take a broad brush, as Sakane says, we are going to suffer in the long term, and we need to be careful on how we deal with it.
Professor, one of the things, classic politics teaches you that the way to achieve something is to align someone else's interests with yours. Are the interests of the profession now properly aligned?
I think there's a lot of work to be done on that. And can I maybe just add to the whole question of culture, because you asked about culture and how do you change culture and what drives behavior. And I'll use an example to demonstrate it, but I think it's a really important example. In 2001, the GARP monitoring panel was established as a joint initiative between SAICA and the JSE. It was renamed the Financial Reporting Investigation Panel, the FRIP. Quite a lot of studies have been done, and you can go and talk to audit partners and technical partners and CFOs and so on alike. And it's very clear that that mechanism, the fact that people knew, listed companies, their CFOs, their auditors, that the JSE is going to look at your financial statements, and there's a mechanism of independent technical people that will review it and tell them whether they believe that those financial statements are misstated. Just that in itself, the studies have shown, is a massive deterrent. So that the fact that those mechanisms are there, so we can talk about people must be honest and do the right thing, but SAICA and the regulator, IRBA and other regulators should also put those stops in place that encourage people to do the right thing, and that where people know I will be named and shamed if I get it wrong, and it might have a financial impact. There were CAs that chaired audit committees and boards and CFOs that got fairly significant fines. And if you start feeling it in your back pocket with the embarrassment of, my goodness, I was responsible and these financial statements were wrong, it does drive behavior. And yes, you need a carrot approach, but you also need a stick approach, that people are forced to do the right thing.
Trevor Manuel, I mean, you talk about Uber having disciplinary cases that go back 7 years. I mean, in a strange way, I suppose,